The applause filled the room, but it wasn't for me. My parents beamed at my sister, Gabriella, as she accepted her award. I clapped too, smiling, but my hands felt heavy. Every cheer they gave her felt like a sharp edge against my chest. I had worked just as hard, maybe harder, but in their eyes I was invisible. At the reception, my mom whispered, "Gabriella has always been more graceful." My dad nodded, eyes never meeting mine. I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. How had it always come to this? Helena, my best friend since childhood, noticed immediately. "Don't let them get to you," she said softly, squeezing my hand. Her presence anchored me, reminded me I wasn't alone. I followed them through the crowd, keeping a calm face, while my parents praised Gabriella endlessly. Every compliment was a reminder of what they considered my lesser self. Later that evening, my parents asked me to toast Gabriella. I stood there, glass trembling slightly, words catching in my throat. They watched me, expecting gratitude. But inside, a quiet determination started to form. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg for recognition. I would wait. I would watch. And when the moment came, they wouldn't see it coming. The next morning, my phone buzzed with Helena's message. "Are you okay? Don't let them win." I smiled briefly, grateful she understood. The pain of yesterday still clung, but her words reminded me I had power too. At breakfast, my parents continued their praises for Gabriella. She handled the speech beautifully, my father said. You could learn from her poise. My hands tightened around my coffee mug. Poise. They always framed my efforts as lacking, while elevating Gabriella's smallest gestures. I responded quietly, nodding, letting their words roll over me without reaction. Inside, I cataloged every phrase, every glance, every slight. I was building a record, not for revenge yet, but for clarity. Helena joined me later at the park, our usual meeting spot. I confided, "They make me feel invisible." She nodded knowingly. "Then stop trying to prove yourself to them. Let them underestimate you." Her advice hit like a spark. For years, I had tried to earn their approval, bending and adjusting, shrinking myself to fit their vision. Now I realized I could step back, watch and wait. I watched Gabriella on the school stage, parents clapping, admiration in their eyes. My pulse steadied. I wouldn't compete directly yet. I would plan, quietly, strategically, and when the time came, they'd witness the truth I had been building all along. Days turned into weeks, and every family gathering became a stage. Gabriella received constant attention, while I was praised politely, or ignored entirely. My parents' words were sharp even when polite. You try hard, but maybe Gabriella's way is better. Helena noticed the pattern, and we began analyzing it together. They love public recognition, she said. Every slight you feel, they enjoy in front of witnesses. That insight changed everything. I began taking notes, small details at first, phrases, timing, who was present. My anger didn't fuel me, clarity did. At school, I focused on excelling quietly. Teachers noticed my improvements, peers respected my determination, but my parents' attention remained elsewhere. The imbalance stung, but I learned patience. Helena encouraged me. "Let them underestimate you," she repeated. "Power grows in silence." One afternoon, at a family dinner, my mom complimented Gabriella for solving a minor problem. "You could learn from her approach," she said to me. I smiled politely, keeping my posture straight. Inside, I logged every word. By the evening, I felt a new confidence. I wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. I was observing, absorbing, preparing. Gabriella's spotlight didn't diminish me, it clarified my strategy. Helena's eyes met mine across the table. No words were needed. We both knew the game had shifted. I wouldn't confront yet. I would build, silently, and when the time came, the outcome would shock them. The school awards ceremony arrived. Gabriella, radiant in a new dress, stood proudly on stage. My parents beamed, clapping louder for her than anyone else. I clapped too, but my gaze was steady, my mind recording every reaction. When Gabriella received a standing ovation, my father whispered, "See, she's always been more charming." My mother nodded. Their attention was a weight I had learned to carry silently. After the ceremony, Helena caught up with me. "They can't see your strength yet," she said, voice low. But you're building it. I nodded. That night, I sat in my room, reviewing my notes from months of gatherings. Patterns emerged clearly. My parents elevated Gabriella in public, minimized me subtly, and created a hierarchy I had always resisted acknowledging. But I wasn't angry. I was strategic. Every slight, every comparison, every compliment aimed elsewhere was a piece of evidence. I began plotting, not revenge, not confrontation, but the reveal of undeniable truth. The next day, at school, I started taking small steps, leading projects quietly, excelling in visible ways without drawing attention to my intentions. Helena supported me, encouraging patience and precision. By the end of the week, a subtle shift began. I noticed teachers and peers responding differently to my calm confidence. My parents remained oblivious, focused solely on Gabriella. That would be their mistake. Weeks later, a family event forced another public showcase. Gabriella, polished and prepared, expected applause and admiration. My parents didn't disappoint, offering constant validation. I smiled politely, holding myself upright, recording everything silently. Helena joined me before the event. Remember, she said, your strength is quiet. Let them underestimate you. I nodded. Every word was a reminder of patience and preparation. During the event, Gabriella received praise for small accomplishments, while my efforts were barely acknowledged. The sting was familiar, but I didn't react. I cataloged, observed, and strategized. Later, when my parents asked me to comment on Gabriella's achievements, I gave a polite, measured response. No anger, no tears, just calm observation. Inside, I felt satisfaction. I was in control. That night, I reviewed my notes meticulously. Dates, phrases, reactions. Every public slight documented. Helena smiled at my dedication. You're building something they won't see coming, she said. I realized I had grown in ways my parents never acknowledged. My confidence, patience, and calculated calmness were transforming me. Gabriella's public victories didn't diminish me, they clarified my path. By bedtime, I whispered to myself, they won't see it coming. And for the first time, I felt truly ready. The plan had begun, and I was fully in control. The school fundraiser was the perfect stage for Gabriella. She smiled, shook hands, and received compliments for small gestures that seemed effortless. My parents were at her side, their faces shining with pride. I watched quietly, every detail seared into memory. Helena leaned close. Notice how they react when others praise her? That's what you need to understand. I nodded. Observation was the key. Reacting emotionally would only give them the satisfaction of control. I moved through the event calmly, offering help quietly, organizing volunteers, and handling issues efficiently. Teachers and parents began noticing my composure. I answered questions confidently, without seeking validation, and slowly I felt the shift. My parents barely acknowledged me, but that no longer mattered. Later, as Gabriella received another round of applause, my father whispered, "She has a natural charm, doesn't she?" My mother smiled. Their words stung, but I held my calm. Every compliment they gave Gabriella was another piece of the puzzle, a pattern I could exploit later. After the event, Helena and I met at the park. "They'll keep underestimating you," she said. "That's their mistake." I nodded, a smile touching my lips. Patience was my ally, silence my shield, and observation my weapon. That night, I documented every interaction, every look, and every word. Gabriella's triumphs weren't my defeat, they were the clues I needed. And I was ready to wait for the moment my strategy would finally unfold. The next week brought a family meeting. My parents again lavished attention on Gabriella, praising her choices and successes. I stayed silent, hence folded eyes calm. Inside, I cataloged each compliment, each subtle comparison, each glance of pride or disappointment. Helena texted, "Remember, your patience is power. Keep noting everything." Her reminder felt like armor. I had spent years reacting to their judgments, but now I was observing strategically. Gabriella tried to involve me in the discussion, asking my opinion about school projects. I answered politely, clearly, and concisely. I wasn't competing, but I wasn't disappearing either. The adults barely noticed, but their reactions were all recorded. Later, My parents discussed Gabriella's achievements in front of distant relatives. Every word about her poise, intelligence, and charm contrasted with subtle critiques of me. I stayed calm, absorbing every syllable. That night, I reviewed my notes and added layers: who spoke, who noticed, who reacted to their praises. A pattern became undeniable. My parents' admiration for Gabriella was public, performative, and consistent. Helena called. "They think they've won," she said. "But the real power is what they don't see coming." I smiled, feeling a quiet thrill. The long game was underway, and I had already begun preparing my move, step by careful step. The weekend brought a neighborhood talent show. Gabriella performed flawlessly, parents applauding louder than anyone. I watched from the sidelines, calm and steady. Every cheer, every nod, every whispered praise was being logged in my mind and in my notebook later. Helena nudged me. "Notice the patterns. This is where they shine and where you learn." I nodded. Observing without reacting was a skill I was mastering. When Gabriella struggled briefly with a prop, my parents rushed to help, their voices filled with encouragement. I remained composed, offering assistance only when necessary and quietly. Teachers began approaching me, thanking me for organization and quick problem-solving. My parents missed it entirely. Later, my mother whispered to a friend, "Gabriella always seems more confident. Helena could take notes, right?" My chest tightened, but I didn't respond. I smiled politely, letting the comment slide. After the event, Helena and I reviewed my notes. Every movement, word, and reaction was a building block. Patience had become a game, observation a tool, and planning a weapon. Gabriella's spotlight was a guide, not a threat. That night, I wrote the final observations of the week: patterns, timings, weaknesses. The framework for what would come next was forming. I wasn't plotting chaos. I was creating undeniable truth, quietly and deliberately. At the family dinner, the dynamic repeated. Gabriella received compliments, attention, and guidance from everyone. I ate calmly, smiling politely, my notebook open later to record every detail. Helena leaned over at one point. "They think you're passive, but you're building power." I smiled. That was exactly what I was doing, building quietly while they acted oblivious. After dinner, my father suggested Gabriella could teach me how to improve in subtle ways. I nodded slowly, pretending humility while my mind cataloged each word. The suggestion was another piece of the pattern. Later, my parents discussed Gabriella's achievements at length, leaving no space for my contributions. I stayed silent. Inside, a slow, steady fire grew. The patience of months was crystallizing into strategy. That night, I reviewed everything, adding cross-references, dates, places, phrases. Helena's guidance echoed in my mind. "Let them underestimate you. That's when you'll have the advantage." I realized the plan was more than patience. It was inevitability. Their favoritism had created patterns so consistent they had unknowingly exposed themselves. The moment of truth was approaching. The school science fair became another stage. Gabriella's project was impressive, but my display attracted teachers quietly seeking advice. I answered questions calmly, confidently, without seeking attention, letting my work speak. My parents hovered around Gabriella, praising her ideas while barely glancing at mine. I smiled politely, noting every reaction. Helena nudged me later. "See, they don't notice your impact yet." As visitors approached, I calmly explained experiments, answered detailed questions, and corrected small misunderstandings. Teachers nodded appreciatively. My parents continued their scripted admiration for Gabriella, unaware of my rising influence. After the fair, I returned home and meticulously added observations to my notes. Who noticed, what they said, and how my parents reacted. Every slight, every compliment to Gabriella, every overlooked achievement of mine, everything was evidence. Helena texted, "You're ready. Keep observing, keep calm. Soon it all comes together." I smiled, feeling a quiet thrill. I was no longer invisible. I was patient, strategic, and unstoppable. The pieces were aligning, and the moment my parents would realize the truth was drawing closer. The weekend brought another family gathering. My parents again praised Gabriella for her school awards, her manners, and her charm. I stayed calm, seated quietly, observing every expression, every glance, every tone of voice. Helena's words echoed in my mind. They think they're teaching you humility. You're teaching yourself power. I nodded silently. Patience had become my strategy, observation my weapon, and silence my shield. Gabriella leaned close, asking me how I manage my projects. I answered politely, giving enough detail without inviting competition. My parents barely listened, but I recorded every reaction, every sigh of admiration for Gabriella. After dinner, my father whispered to a relative, "Gabriella always seems more confident. Helena could learn from her." I smiled politely, letting the comment sink. Inside, the quiet fire of strategy burned brighter. Later, Helena and I reviewed the week's notes. Patterns were clear. Every public praise, every subtle comparison, every glance of pride or disappointment, all predictable. I began planning the moments when patience would transform into action. That night, I wrote meticulously, cross-referencing interactions, noting who witnessed what. Gabriella's triumphs were not threats, they were the clues I needed. I wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. I was building evidence, creating undeniable truth, and preparing for the moment my strategy would unfold fully. Monday arrived, and school felt like a battlefield. Gabriella received extra attention from teachers and classmates. My parents called frequently to check in on her, praising her accomplishments over the phone. I stayed calm, completing my assignments efficiently and politely correcting minor errors in group projects. Helena had reminded me, let them underestimate your influence. That's when your power grows. By mid-morning, classmates were coming to me for guidance. I helped without boasting, calmly explaining concepts, showing subtle competence. Gabriella smiled politely at me, unaware of the silent shift occurring. At lunch, my parents called again to gush over Gabriella's progress. I listened quietly, noting every word. The pattern was clear: public admiration, private expectation, and a consistent hierarchy they tried to enforce. After school, Helena called. "You've created a rhythm. They won't see the impact until it's too late," she said. I nodded, feeling a quiet thrill. Patience was no longer passive. It was deliberate, strategic, unstoppable. That night, I wrote every detail down. The public favoritism, the subtle comparisons, and the blind spots of my parents' pride, all meticulously recorded. Each note strengthened the plan. Each observation became a step toward the inevitable reveal. The next family meeting was tense. Gabriella received constant praise, attention, and validation. My parents leaned into their pattern of comparison, unaware I had stopped reacting emotionally. I smiled politely, keeping my posture relaxed. Every word they spoke about Gabriella, every subtle critique aimed at me, became data. Helena's advice rang in my mind. Observe. Document. Let the truth grow quietly. Later, Gabriella tried to involve me in conversation. I answered confidently, clearly and calmly. My parents barely noticed, but I saw how others responded. Nods, respectful glances, quiet admiration. Afterward, my father commented, "She's improving. Maybe she can learn from Gabriella." I nodded silently, inwardly noting his own admission that I had the ability to compete without ever trying. That night, I reviewed my notes, building a clear timeline of every comparison and compliment. Each entry reinforced the inevitability of the shift. Gabriella's spotlight was temporary. My patience and strategy were permanent. Helena called. "You've reached the stage where observation alone is enough. Soon it all aligns," she said. I smiled. I wasn't rushing. I was preparing for the moment my strategy would reveal itself with undeniable impact. At the school talent show, Gabriella performed flawlessly. Applause and cheers echoed around the auditorium. I stayed calm, quietly observing, noting each reaction, each glance, each sign of admiration from teachers, parents, and classmates. Helena whispered in my mind, "They celebrate her, but you are learning everything they miss." I moved through the event efficiently, answering questions, helping quietly, and letting my competence be seen without overt displays. After Gabriella's performance, my parents praised her in front of everyone, unaware of the subtle authority I was gaining among teachers and peers. My calm presence drew quiet acknowledgement, and I logged every reaction meticulously. Later, at home, Helena and I reviewed the notes. Patterns were clear: public admiration, private expectation, and consistent comparison. Each piece of evidence strengthened the plan. Patience had become active strategy, observation a weapon, and silence a shield. That night, I wrote down everything: interactions, reactions, timing. The pieces were aligning. Gabriella's victories were clues. The moment my plan would unfold was approaching, and I was ready to execute with precision. The following week brought another family dinner. Gabriella again received constant attention and praise. My parents repeated patterns, offering compliments, subtle critiques, and public approval. I sat quietly, documenting every word. Helena's voice guided me. They think you're passive, but you're building power they cannot see. I nodded, keeping calm. My observation was precise, my patience deliberate. Gabriella leaned toward me, seeking approval. I answered calmly and clearly, showing competence without inviting competition. My parents barely noticed, but I logged every reaction. Later, my father whispered to a relative, "Gabriella always seems more confident. Helena could learn from her." I smiled politely, inwardly noting the admission that I had skills they were ignoring. That night, I reviewed my notes, carefully building timelines, patterns, and observations. Public favoritism had created an undeniable map of behavior. Gabriella's spotlight was temporary. My patience, strategy, and careful observation were permanent. The moment of reckoning was drawing near. The next parent-teacher meeting arrived. Gabriella received praise for her grades, behavior, and leadership. I stayed calm, seated quietly, observing. My parents' pride in her was obvious, but I noticed subtle cracks in how they overlooked my contributions. Helena's words echoed. They celebrate the obvious. You own the unseen. I nodded silently, feeling the quiet thrill of control. Every compliment my parents gave Gabriella, every comparison they made, became data for the plan. During group discussions, I spoke clearly, offering solutions and insights. Teachers listened attentively, quietly acknowledging my skill. Gabriella smiled politely, unaware that the balance of influence was slowly shifting. After the meeting, my father whispered to a colleague, "Helena is capable, but she needs guidance from Gabriella." I smiled inwardly. They had no idea that my patience had created a quiet authority. At home, Helena and I reviewed every interaction. Each note confirmed the pattern: comparisons, public favoritism, and repeated underestimation. I wasn't reacting anymore, I was preparing. Every detail became a building block for the moment my strategy would unfold. That night, I wrote meticulously, linking patterns, documenting reactions, and reinforcing timelines. Gabriella's attention was temporary. My methodical observation, preparation, and composure were permanent. Soon, the plan would move from silent preparation to undeniable reality. During class, a group project required leadership. Gabriella naturally assumed control, and my parents' calls earlier that morning had praised her initiative. I didn't compete. I observed. Helena's voice reminded me, the loudest triumphs aren't always the strongest. Build quietly. I calmly offered guidance, corrected minor mistakes, and shared insight. Classmates listened and respected my competence. By mid-afternoon, subtle shifts were visible. Gabriella's peers started seeking my advice. My parents, unaware of the change, still called to praise her, reinforcing their blind pattern. After school, I noted every glance, every nod, and every comment in my journal. The evidence was growing. Public favoritism created predictable patterns. My strategy relied on their overconfidence in Gabriella's abilities. That evening, Helena and I analyzed the notes. Every reaction my parents had made, every sigh, smile, or glance fit into the narrative I was building. Patience wasn't passive. It was precise, deliberate, and unstoppable. I prepared mentally for the next family gathering. Every event became an opportunity. Every comparison, every public praise would feed the plan. Gabriella's triumphs were stepping stones. My moment of influence was drawing closer. A weekend family dinner arrived, and the familiar routine began. Gabriella received constant praise for small and large accomplishments. My parents beamed, oblivious to the quiet shift occurring. I smiled politely, keeping calm, letting every compliment and comparison serve as data. Helena's words guided me. Every public triumph is a step toward their revelation. Watch, record, wait. During conversation, I contributed thoughtfully and clearly. Teachers, friends, and relatives subtly noticed my confidence. Gabriella smiled politely, unaware that the attention she received had created the perfect environment for my influence. After dinner, my father whispered, "She's improving, but Gabriella leads naturally." I nodded silently. The acknowledgement confirmed that my patience and preparation were creating undeniable authority without confrontation. That night, I reviewed every note. Patterns, reactions, and timing were perfectly aligned. Each public comparison, each compliment, became part of the evidence that would eventually shift perception. Gabriella's moment in the spotlight was temporary, my strategy was enduring. Helena called, her voice steady in my mind. "You've reached the threshold. Soon, every blind spot they trust becomes your stage." I smiled. I was ready. The moment of subtle revelation would arrive, and my patience would finally show its power. Monday arrived with tension and expectation. Gabriella received praise from teachers, classmates, and my parents alike. I stayed composed, quietly observing, and noting every reaction. During group discussions, I contributed calmly, subtly correcting errors and offering insights. Peers began seeking my guidance without my prompting. Gabriella noticed, but her smile remained polite and unaware of a change in dynamic. Helena whispered, "Let the subtle power rise. They'll see, but too late to intervene." I nodded, continuing to log every glance, every nod, every compliment in my journal. After school, my parents called, praising Gabriella for small victories. I remained silent, knowing every observation added to the narrative I was carefully constructing. Public comparison had created a predictable pattern, and I was building an undeniable record. That night, I reviewed the week's events meticulously. Each compliment, sigh, and glance reinforced the strategy. Gabriella's momentary triumphs were stepping stones, and I had learned to transform patience into authority, observation into influence, and silence into power. I prepared for the next family gathering. Every interaction, every unnoticed gesture, was another opportunity to reveal the shift in perception they had overlooked. The next family dinner brought familiar patterns. Gabriella received continuous praise. My parents praised her for everything from grades to politeness. I stayed calm, observing each word, each gesture, each subtle comparison. Helena reminded me, every public display is a brick. Build quietly, and they won't notice the foundation until it stands unshakable. I smiled inwardly. Every compliment and comparison was data. Every reaction was evidence. During conversation, I offered insight and guidance calmly. Friends, relatives, and teachers subtly noticed my confidence. Gabriella smiled politely, oblivious to the quiet influence I was cultivating. After dinner, my father whispered, "She's improving, but Gabriella naturally leads." I nodded silently. Their blind pattern confirmed the strength of patience and observation. That night, I logged every detail. Each public comparison, each praise, each oversight was catalogued. Gabriella's triumphs were temporary. My preparation and composure were permanent. Helena's voice echoed, "The stage is set. Soon, every misstep they trust becomes your revelation." I felt ready. Months of observation, strategy, and patience had built the foundation. The subtle shift in influence, nearly invisible to them, would soon become undeniable. Gabriella's moment was fading. My power was quietly, steadily rising. The school award ceremony arrived. Gabriella was praised publicly again, receiving applause from teachers, parents, and classmates. I sat quietly, smiling politely, letting every word and cheer register in my memory. Helena's voice whispered in my mind, "Let them celebrate the surface. You own the foundation." During the ceremony, I offered subtle corrections to the program's flow, quietly assisting teachers. My presence went unnoticed by my parents, but classmates began glancing at me, seeking guidance. Gabriella noticed, confused by the shift in attention, but she didn't understand what was happening. After the ceremony, photos were taken, awards given, and parents congratulated Gabriella. I stayed composed, observing, and logging every reaction. Each compliment my parents gave her became evidence, proof of the predictable pattern. At home, Helena and I reviewed the day. They are blind to the quiet control. Soon, your authority will be undeniable, she reminded me. Every small gesture, every unnoticed detail had built toward the inevitable. That night, I prepared for the final family gathering of the month. Gabriella's public victories had set the stage. I had the patience, the records, and the quiet confidence. The plan was ready to move from preparation to execution. I felt calm, powerful, and unstoppable. The family gathering was lavish. Conversations flowed, laughter filled the room, and my parents praised Gabriella for everything: grades, manners, even the way she laughed. I remained calm, quietly observing. I spoke only when necessary, offering precise input that subtly impressed relatives and friends. Eyes that had once only followed Gabriella now flicked toward me. Each glance was a confirmation that the shift I had nurtured quietly was happening. Helena's words guided me. Every public adoration they offer her, you will transform into proof of your readiness. Let it unfold. I took notes mentally, cataloging reactions, gestures, and praise. When my parents gushed over Gabriella again, I smiled, listened, and kept silent. Silence had become my weapon. The subtle authority I had built was now visible, even if my parents couldn't see it. By the end of the evening, whispers began circulating. Relatives complimented my poise, insight, and calm leadership. Gabriella's earlier dominance and attention now shared the room with my growing influence. My strategy was working perfectly, quietly, and unassailable. That night, I reviewed every note. Helena's voice was calm. Soon the shift will be undeniable. Let patience do its work. I felt ready. The moment of revelation was almost here. The next school meeting became pivotal. Teachers openly recognized my guidance in projects, while Gabriella's parents still praised her. I sat calmly, offering insight when asked, letting every compliment to Gabriella reinforce my evidence of predictable patterns. Classmates turned to me first. Teachers deferred to my suggestions. My parents, still blind to the subtle power, gushed over Gabriella, unaware that the balance had shifted. Helena whispered, "They see what they want. Soon, they will see the truth. You've built this invisibly, perfectly." I nodded, taking in every glance, every gesture, every comment. After the meeting, my parents discussed Gabriella's natural leadership openly. I smiled internally, knowing their public favoritism had strengthened my quiet authority. Every documented reaction, every overlooked detail, had created the inevitable. That evening, I prepared for the final reveal. Months of patience, observation, and strategic silence were ready to unfold. Gabriella's momentary victories were the perfect backdrop. My time to shine was coming, and the shift in perception was unstoppable. Family dinner. The usual pattern. Gabriella praised, I silent. But this time, when my father asked for solutions on a trivial dispute, I calmly explained a clear, practical plan. Relatives nodded. My parents blinked. The balance had shifted. Gabriella looked at me, puzzled. My smile was polite, calm. The whispers began. Eyes turned toward me. My parents, still blind to their own pattern, gushed over Gabriella's accomplishments, inadvertently reinforcing my authority. Helena's words were steady. Step back, let them see the shift. Their comparisons are your stage. I stayed silent, letting my presence speak louder than words. By the end of the dinner, everyone consulted me for advice. Gabriella's charm had been overshadowed by quiet competence. My parents noticed too late. My influence was undeniable. That night, I recorded every reaction, every glance, every phrase. The final step was near. Months of preparation had created the perfect moment of revelation. My patience, strategy, and composure had quietly turned the tide. The next Sunday, family brunch became the stage. Gabriella began receiving praise as usual. I smiled calm, letting Helena's advice guide me. The reveal is subtle, precise, inevitable. When a minor disagreement arose, I offered a solution. Relatives nodded. Colleagues of my parents even commented on my clarity and poise. My parents' blind favoritism toward Gabriella amplified the contrast. By the end of the meal, whispers and glances confirmed it. The shift was complete. Gabriella's public victories had become the stage for my quiet authority. My parents, seeing the change too late, struggled to redirect attention. I felt calm satisfaction. Months of observation, patience, and strategic silence had achieved the inevitable. Gabriella's triumphs had created the perfect environment for my influence to rise. Helena's words echoed, "You've built this quietly. They will recognize, too late, the power you've always held." I smiled. The plan had worked. The subtle authority I had nurtured was undeniable. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. No comparisons, no favoritism, just undeniable, unshakable control over my own life, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing it had been orchestrated perfectly.